Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Streaming Alchemy. Today is our 100th live stream that we've done under Streaming Alchemy. So really glad you could join us for this. On today's show, we're going to be taking a look at everything around discovery with NDI. So all the different mechanisms for finding different NDI sources across the network and how all of that works sort of under the hood. But before we get there, as always, I welcome any comments, suggestions, questions. We try to get through all of them here on the show, so we'll make this very interactive. Also, if you'd like to join us here live on the show, we have a link in the show notes that will let you click, and somebody from the studio will get you on. All right, so let's actually jump in and get started here. If you think about NDI, there's a certain sort of magic to it. You just have sources across a network, and you have receivers that want to leverage those sources, and you just sort of go in and find them and connect to them. There's a lot of mechanics behind this. So let me actually just start with a blank sort of studio monitor screen. And if I come over here, this little sort of hamburger menu in the upper left-hand corner basically is showing you all the sources that have been discovered on the network. And the way these sources are broken up is through systems. So these are all different systems or devices that are on the network. And then all the different NDI feeds that are available on those individual systems. So when you go down and you have something like a camera here, it just has the single feed out. Other devices can have multiple feeds coming out. And, it just becomes a very flexible mechanism. But if we start to look into the mechanics behind this, I think you'll get a better understanding of the detail that is sort of necessary to make all this happen. And it could help you better configure the network settings that you have. So let's start. I'm going to connect to here, and this will be a good diagram to start with. So in your typical network that you have for a production, you'll have NDI senders and NDI receivers. Now, certain systems can sort of fall into both camps. So their sender side will act like everybody over here on the right-hand side, and their receiver side will act like the systems that are over here on the left-hand side. But this basically is the mechanism that's taking place under the standard sort of out of the box. This is how NDI works. So what happens with NDI when any one of these sender devices comes online, they use a protocol called mDNS to advertise that they are available online. And in that advertisement, they're basically giving an IP address to the network to say, if you need to talk to me, you talk to me on this IP address. And they also have things with ports to say, this feed is on this port. So every IP address is every NDI source is a combination of an IP address and a port. So when these all advertise, any systems that are up that are potential NDI receivers will actually see that message go out. It's a multicast message. That's the M in mDNS is multicast. So it's a multicast message. And what they will do is they will take that information from that NDI source and they will store it in what's basically called a local daemon. It's basically a background task that's running all the time in the NDI receiver app that caches all of these broadcasts that sources are available. And so this database here is actually a map from this system's perspective of all the sources that are available. When an NDI receiver is looking for a source, it'll go to this database here. So it's not going out to anything central. It's going out to its own local database that was built up by transmitters on the sender side to see what sources are available. And because it has an IP address and a port, it's able to just go and make that connection to pull in that source. So what happens if one of these systems isn't up at the time these systems come on and it didn't get the broadcast? Well, initially, and you've probably seen this, when you bring something up right away, you can go in and you don't see that many sources, or you see some of them, but not others. What ends up happening is that this system needs to go out and say, if you are a sender, identify yourself. It's basically asking the network to say, if you are a sender and you get this message, tell me who you are and how I can connect with you. And again, that then gets populated back in this local cache that's run sort of behind the scenes with an NDI receiver. This is why you can sometimes in a network have different systems seeing different sources where and it can drive you crazy. You'd be like, no, I know it's out there, but I'm not seeing it. It's because none of this stuff is sort of stored and shared in the out-of-the-box mechanism that's used for all this. It is all happening through messaging going back and forth as sort of broadcast messages until the actual connection gets made. And all of these things, so everything we're talking about here happens on specific ports. So, I mean, mDNS, which is it's existed long ago. So, I mean, if you think about how we are used to navigating on the internet, you type in a domain name, neuralnet.com or streamingalchemy.tv. That in that name, when you put that name out there, it's going to something called DNS, a domain naming service, that actually looks up that name and gives you back an IP address to say this is where that name is. This is very, very similar. It's another named thing. But names don't just apply to websites. Names apply to devices. Names apply to services. So lots of devices in a network environment can have names. And mDNS is a way for you to discover those names as a system on a network and then be able to connect to the services behind them. So this is how this mechanism sort of works out of the box. But the key here is that there is no central directory for NDI when you just use it sort of as the simple, I just sort of plug and play model that goes on here. And that's important because it will be something that you'll run into and can be frustrating. But there are other mechanisms in place to handle this. So let me actually, before we get here, let me jump to some of the comments here. So we have Jawad said, warm greetings from cold Stockholm. Well, if you want to share your cold too, we'd be very happy because it's kind of warm here on the East Coast, better than it's been. But I am, for one, I'm definitely looking forward to winter coming. We also have Battle for Freedom. So Battle, thank you for joining us. Yes, this is pretty exciting to be covering this. It's a topic that we get a lot of questions about. So hopefully this will be helpful to people. And Battle saying he just upgraded to vMix 25 and we get to 4K at the end of the year. That is great. I think there's a lot of cool capabilities as you sort of move up the vMix ladder of versions. So getting to 4K will give you a lot as well. So definitely well worth the step. So we have SDA Song. So SDA Song, thank you. Happy Friday back to you. It's great to have you here. Okay, so the next step. So this is sort of, we just covered what the out-of-the-box system looks like. But this may not always work. The limitation in this model is that it needs to be on a single subnet. And I'll put an asterisk on that because with some very clever networking backend infrastructure, you could make it work across multiple subnets, but it is not that straightforward. And it doesn't give you a reliable way because different things can be blocked and different things can get congested. So you may find that it is not absolutely the best mechanism in more complex network settings. And that's why NewTek released something called Access Manager. One thing among many. I mean, their Access Manager does a lot of different things. So the first thing that we'll really talk about Access Manager around is rights and permissions. If you think about the model that we just looked at, it is sort of a very flat model. Every advertised source is seen by every potential receiver, and they can access that. So if this were a setting where you had multiple studios on a common network, you may not want everybody to see everything. You may have things that your post-production crew could be working on, and you may have things that your live team are working on, and you'd want to keep those separate. So in this mechanism, you wouldn't be able to do that. So you'd have to deal with that. So one of the things that is available inside of Access Manager is the ability to set up different groups of systems and say, anything that this system sends out, I want it to send out just on this, what they call a group. Now, groups are related to systems. They're sort of IP addresses, and a system can send NDI sources to multiple different groups. So, but you can also have systems decide to receive from multiple different groups. So it's basically a way of bucketing different sources and then exposing those sources to different receivers. So if you look at this model, and I borrowed this from NewTek, but it's really a great diagram for explaining how groups work. If I were here in sort of system A, I can turn around and say, everything that I'm going to send out as the public group. And that is the default group. So in your NDI mDNS discovery mechanism, everything is in the public group. So this can turn around and say, I'm going to send everything that I have in the public group. But I want to receive things, not just that I have on my own network, public, but that are also from two other systems that are out there, two other groups that are available. And they would be called the editorial group and the art department group. So what this means is that system A can see everybody that is sending their feeds out to editorial group, or everybody that's sending their feeds out to art department group. And that gives you the first view to this. Right now, everybody can see what is sent out by group A, but only people that are actually subscribed to art department group on the receive group or the editorial group on the receive group will see their feeds. And if you look at the way this diagram has these systems set up, everybody in B, on system B, can see all the things published by system A and all their own, if other people in this network are sending to the editorial group, they'll see all that. But what they do not see is anything published by system C over here, because that's publishing everything to the art department group. So these two systems do not see each other at all. So as far as they are concerned, there's no link between them. None of the sources published by A are by C or seen by B or B or seen by C. But A sees everything from both of them. So you can easily sort of see how this grouping works. You can turn around and say, if this is set up, running in the background, I can now have the flow of NDI source visibility constrained to this sort of map of how I want to see it. And this is ideal. This is exactly the sort of thing. This could be some central group that's managing everything. This could be your post-production group, and this could be your live group. The live and post never see anybody. They don't see each other, but everybody can see whatever the public, so the central control group is publishing, and they see everything that's being published by everybody else. So that's a great diagram sort of view of how this works. But so let me actually jump in and show how this would look like in Access Manager. So when you open Access Manager, so it'll dig a little deeper in here, there are 3 tabs in it. One is for the groups. And as you saw we had before, we have send groups and receive groups. So what do I want the NDI sources on this system to be published under? And right now I just have they're all published to public. But I could publish them, just add a group name over here. And I could turn around and say, this is my studio group. So now with that in there, now you can see I have the published to studio and the published to public. And if I took public away, then somebody would actively have to subscribe to studio, sort of get that in their receive group in order to see these sources. And that's what they would do up here. You could come there and add what groups do I see? And I could just type in studio here. And that's how you can set up a system to say, I want to advertise my sources on these groups, and I want to receive advertisements of different sources from these other groups. And works really, really well for handling that. Now, that part is fairly straightforward. The next piece, though, deals with how do you deal with sources that are sort of not on my subnet, that are not easy to get to. And that's what the external sources are. So if I come here, you can actually type in the IP address of any source on your network. It doesn't have to be in your same subnet. And you would then be able to see all the different NDI feeds published by that device or that system. And that's what the external sources let you do. So you can type in an IP address and you can end up connecting to that system, even if it's not on your local subnet. But big caveat here, because networking is a complex thing, and I'm not going to pretend that I'm a networking expert by any means. So I sort of caveat everything I say with that. But in order for subnets to see each other, there needs to be a path that exists between subnet A and subnet B. There needs to be some way that when on subnet A, I ask to get to an address, that there is a path the system understands, my networking infrastructure understands to get me to the other subnet. So first, there has to be a physical end-to-end. There has to be a way, like wires I can travel to get to that other subnet. The second thing, though, is that the way routing works is inside switches, there are what's called routing tables. And there are protocols that actually let you update all the different routes. There's a protocol called RIP, which basically lets one switch tell another switch, here's how you would route to me, and vice versa. All of that needs to be configured to make this happen. So working across multiple subnets, even though it's like easy to set up, the networking infrastructure to make that happen is not straightforward. And you would need IT support to be sure all of that works and works in a reliable way. But because you have this, you could actually now have, use something beyond groups. You could turn around and say, I have different systems on different subnets, and I can then just pick individual systems on those different subnets to pull in sources from. And so that can give you another layer of segmentation. But in addition to that, all of the stuff we have in mDNS is still operating. So with Access Manager here, you are still using everything that we had with mDNS. You're just turning around and saying, I'm actually going and adding additional details for things that I may want to connect to. So this can also be very useful even if you're on one subnet, because as we mentioned, discovery under mDNS can take time. So if you turned around and said, I have, my TriCaster, my cameras, and I have, a CG system and things driving my screens, for on-set displays, all of those things, you could turn around and say, as opposed to having NDI mDNS discovery handle that, where it's sort of everybody has their own view, you could turn around and say, I'm actually going to create a whole list of all of these routes in advance and run Access Manager on every system that needs to be participating in this. And then, as opposed to turning around and waiting for discovery to happen, basically that cache is reading this memory right here. So it's coming back and saying, I now know exactly how to get to that machine, and I have an easy path to do that, and I can get all the NDI sources on that machine. So makes it much, much easier and more reliable doing it that way. But you have to do this for every one of the machines. So you have to go there and create this table with all of these systems in it for each one of the machines you want to put it on. And as an operational process, that can be really, really tedious. So not something that I would do in lieu of something where mDNS discovery works really well. But if you have systems that are more problematic, definitely this would be a way to deal with that. The other thing when you're dealing with external sources, and I'll just sort of show this here. When you come here and you say, I want to add a new source, it gives you what is the type of the source. So it's coming around and saying, I can do NDI or I can do devices. So what is this difference here? All of this that we're looking at sort of works with, I think, NDI 3 and beyond. And you could have older cameras, older other devices, mostly cameras though. And so what this devices let you do is say, I can actually pick a specific device and I can add that. So like here at NewTek Spark, and I could put the actual IP address for that device. And then this makes that device discoverable using Access Manager as well. So it gives you another way. If you're doing something with older hardware, it makes it easy to add that into your Access Manager database. So something to keep in mind with how this all comes together. So what's the next level in Access Manager? It's called Advanced. So what does this let me do? If I come over to Advanced, there are a lot of different things you can set up. So the first one is, how do I want to receive NDI? And there are different modes here. The mode that I would pick if I were doing anything would be Reliable UDP. Reliable UDP is the latest, greatest. It will not work with older devices. So the reason this switched to Legacy UDP is that, if you remember, in my external sources, I was adding a Spark. And so that is probably what switched it. But Reliable UDP, if you're in a more modern set of devices, is going to be the best way to receive video and audio and messaging from all of the NDI devices. Given Reliable UDP, I would be less inclined to do multicast. There are a lot better ways to handle heavy loads on individual sources, and that's a lot of stuff that local bridge can do. So we've talked about that in the past. But unless there was a very specific reason, I'd probably shy away from multicast. Multicast is not network friendly, and it is something that can end up getting congested, causing other issues, not routing correctly, being deprioritized. So if you have things that are spanning different hops and networks, you can have issues with it. So I try to avoid that if possible. But the last one in the Advanced tab is really interesting, and that's network mapping. So in network mapping, it lets you do several things. It'll let you do what we'll talk about next, setting up discovery servers. It'll also let you say, where do I want to send and receive my NDI traffic from? You have like in this case, we have, I think, 3 NICs in here. One of them is plugged in, but you can come back and say, which network card do I actually want to have getting my NDI back and forth? I can turn around also and say, I want to set an NDI device alias. Now, if you recall, when we went into Studio Monitor, when you came down and called up that list, the system names all had unique names. You saw them however they were set up. That unique name is the name of your computer inside of Windows or Mac, or whatever that computer name is. While we try to name things logically, Not everybody's system has logical names. They have these sort of Windows random generated names that mean nothing. So this allows you, without going in and changing anything at the operating system level, to give your system a new name for NDI purposes. So when it discovers the whole way mDNS works, this now will come back and say, if somebody's looking for this alias name for my system, they will find it. And it's just a convenient way to start to organize things inside of your NDI discovery, with the names now match up with roles and functions. And it makes it much easier to work with. So the next thing we're going to talk about, though, is discovery servers and how this would all work. But before I do that, I do want to I think we have a few more people have joined us here. So we have MWestCC watching from Texas. MWest, thank you very much for joining us here. And we have Michael Quist. So Michael, thank you for popping on. If quite all right that you can participate. Hopefully, all is well on your end, and you'll get to catch up with the replay. And always feel free, and this is offered to everybody. If you have any questions after a show, you can always just send them in, and we try to get to them as quickly as we can with everything else we have going on. But okay, so let's talk now about discovery servers and how this works. So when I have this set up and I click discovery server, I don't want to do this because it is going to change some stuff here for what I would do, and we're sending signals over to our main switcher here. But this would turn around and create a new model for how we connect with NDI sources. And that model, let me see, is similar to what we had with mDNS, with one big exception. It now just has one central repository. So let me sort of jump in here again, and I'm going to call this up here. Let me see, let me make sure I'm getting the right thing here. Yep, okay. So this is the difference between the previous model and this model. So let me sort of I'll flip back very quickly over here. So if you saw in the original model for mDNS, we actually had these little daemons running to populate the caches that are stored here. With Discovery Server, it works differently. Discovery Server now has one additional system that you add to your network, and every system, when it comes on, will advertise itself, and Discovery Server will record that. And every system over here that wants to find a source will now go and ask Discovery Server for, is that source available, and can you give me the route to it? And this can greatly simplify everything you need to do with your network discovery. Now it's all in one place. Every single system will see the same view of sources that are available. So every receiver will see the exact same view. The downside to this is that every system that uses this will no longer be using mDNS. And this can only work with newer devices that I believe are NDI 4 and later. So devices, software, I talk about them sort of in general terms. But it needs that in order to work correctly. But it simplifies everything. And to be honest, this is really essential for anything you want to do in the cloud. mDNS, as I mentioned, is multicast. Most of the, like AWS, setting up multicast in a virtual private cloud, like multiple systems set up in AWS to operate it as a single network, that can be incredibly complex and might not always work. Discovery Server eliminates any of the problems. You basically run Discovery Server up in the cloud, and every system then that you have on that virtual private cloud will be able to discover the NDI sources pretty much seamlessly. So it's an incredibly important thing for anybody doing cloud-based production, leveraging NDI. So how do we set this up? This does not come with the free NDI tools. So let me sort of pop out of this. If you want to get to this, you need to go to NDI.tv. So let me I'll try to do this. See if I can open up something here. Give me a second. So let me just go to NDI.tv. And this is, sort of where we download our NDI tools and everything else. And so right here is where it says NDI tools, but next to it, it says SDK. So Discovery Server comes in the NDI SDK. So for everybody that's not a software developer, don't let this sort of put you off. You can just come down here and they will give you sort of 3 software development kits. The software developer kit, which is free, anybody can use it, build software, do whatever you want. But it also comes with a set of utilities, among them Discovery Server. The other 2, the Advanced Developer Kit is a paid-for service, and NDI SDK for Unreal Engine, great, something I'd love to start to explore, but is not something that is really, that you have to pay attention to. But this is the one right here that you will be downloading. That goes under NDI-TV/SDK. So this, I think I have this sitting over here. So this is just a command line, sort of a terminal-based application. And what it's doing is this is sort of running, and it's running its server, and it's telling you it's on port 5959. So if you are using this, you have to make sure that all the systems that are connecting to it have port 5959 unblocked. So if you have local firewalls or any of the other stuff, make sure this port is open. This now is running in the background, and it's listening for any new devices that are going to come on. Now, what I'm going to do over here on the side, you see, sort of off screen, is I'm going to restart vMix. And the reason for that is let me not do that, because again, I don't want to do anything that's going to screw up our what we're seeing here and my ability to feed the TriCaster. So I won't do that. But what would happen is every service that you will be publishing over Discovery Server, you need on that system to turn on Discovery Server, assign the IP address of that Discovery Server in Access Manager. So you'll have to run Access Manager, and they all have to turn around, select Discovery Server, and have the IP of that server in there. You then need to restart all of the services. So anything that was receiving or anything that was broadcasting or sending an NDI stream, you need to restart it so it all starts to talk correctly now to Discovery Server. But that's the only difference here. And what you will see is if you bring something up, all of those things now that you bring up will start to appear here. You'll see these are all the new sources I've just added. These are all the new listeners I have that are, that have connected, asking for things. So you get to see everything that's happening, but this is just running in the background, but on a single system. And that lets you do all of these connections. So the 3 steps, select it over here in Access Manager, start Discovery Services running, and then restart any of the sources and any of the receivers that you need to make sure they all use Discovery Server. And this is it's pretty straightforward. Once you get this downloaded, there is just let me see if I actually have some place I can pick this up. Yeah, I mean, it's basically just so if you go through program files and NDI, and you go in sort of down a path to their utilities, NDI SDK, utilities x64, and it will be there. When you start it, it just starts as a sort of a terminal-based application. So don't be surprised. It's not going to have a nice, pretty UI for it. But these now are the 3 mechanisms. And because this made such a port notification up here. Let me just go a little over the ports that you need. mDNS is on port 5353. So you have to make sure that port is open. Discovery server is on 5959. NDI on each system runs in two levels. The first, which is 5960, is all the messaging. Anything NDI needs to do sort of for housekeeping, for messaging, control, all that stuff is going across 5960. Every one of the media connections after that has its own port. So you'll turn around and it starts at 5961 and just goes up from there. So when you sort of looked at the all the different sources that I had out of any one of these systems, so Alchemy Studio and all those sources, each one of those is coming in from my computer's IP address port starting at 5961 up to however many I have. So it just keeps growing and using those ports. So you have to make sure all those ports are free, but that's sort of the mechanism that's behind all of this. So it's three different approaches to discovery, but each one of them is using the same core underlying concepts. And Discovery Server is probably the easiest overall to do if your network has devices that would all be compliant with it. And what you'll find is there are a lot of cameras out there. So let me actually just show you, because you don't really necessarily see this all the time. But if I come over here and let me just go here, and I'm going to go over to, I think I got a camera over here. Okay, so let me just sort of jump in here. You'll see if I go over to network here, you actually have all the things you can set up here for your standard IP. But I believe in here, let's see, we have, NDI config, sorry. So under NDI config here, you have everything you need for NDI Discovery Server. So this may be something you've never really done before, but this is exactly where you set this up. So this camera here, you can turn on NDI Discovery Server, put in the correct IP address, and then this camera now, every time it comes on, would register with Discovery Server. So it's built into, devices here. It's not just a computer-based application. It is core to sort of the firmware on a lot of modern NDI devices. So definitely something to keep in mind. You can set this up very granular level, and it makes things much, much easier as long as you sort of follow the rules. Make sure the server is always up, and then every device that connects after the server is up, should be fine. All right, so this was a lot of fun, and certainly a show we wanted to do. It was something that I think for our 100th live stream, that we wanted to do something that was NDI related. Our studio is really based very tightly around NDI. So it's something that I think we wanted to cover. And hopefully this is something that you will find useful as well. So let's see, we have a few more people. So George Kennedy. George, good afternoon. George is actually the person, he had asked me a question about this, and it got me thinking that this would be a great show. So thank you for the show idea, George. He also says, do you need a beefy computer to run NDI Discovery Servers? And the answer is no. It doesn't really require anything. Something like a NUC would be great. You can also run it sort of in the background on another computer. So it is really a lightweight system for doing discovery. So any older system would probably work perfectly for this. And it isn't routing NDI. So that's the other thing. It is simply, it's a matchmaker. It's going there and telling you what you need to do on both sides to make connections. And so it doesn't need massive networking or anything like that. It's something that can run on much lower end systems with much less demanding network connections. So thank you, George. That's a great question. I should have emphasized that a bit before. But everything that we've shown here also is free, which is outside of the hardware itself that you need to run all this stuff, all the software tools are free. So if you are struggling with different systems and different configurations in NDI, this should give you a couple of options for ways to sort of lock that down and make this work really smoothly. So we are probably at the end of what I wanted to go for this show. I think for everything that could be a lot of questions on this, so we'll sort of move the questions, more detailed questions, into the post show. But I am told we have a caller here, so uh,
Hey, John.
George, how are you?
How's it going, man?
Good. So thank you
Twice
for
in one
joining us
week.
here.
Sure.
So yeah, do you have a question, or you want to share something?
So, one of the things, well, obviously, over the past couple of months, obviously, everything we do is workflow driven. So, one of the things I've been looking at. So, naming conventions, being able to name things, obviously, with running NDI, and you start adding sources, it gets really busy and you have a lot going on. Is there a certain workflow you're working with to name things as you go down the line? Obviously, you can't really use in certain instances.
Yep.
So I'm just curious, what's your process?
So normally, what we would do is we would have, for anything we're doing serious, we'd have systems with specific names that sort of define their roles, and the sources themselves are typically defined by the software application. So you can't necessarily control that unless you are sort of going in and remapping everything to a sort of a system name and a service name. But for us, it really is just a question of, like, for all our cameras, we always name them SA cam. So I know right away that's a camera in the studio that I'm using as part of my standard flow. Uh, Everything beyond that really just comes to working with something that is identifiable to us. And that from there, we always know when we see it exactly what the role of that device is and what the content of that source is. So it's really, everybody's going to find something different that works for them, and it's, clearly, if you are working in AWS, there may be other types of indicators you want. So, what systems on different instances you're using. So there may be unique identifiers that you use for different types of connection setups. But, it really is just a matter of identifying systems and then making sure that the names, if a name is weird, you can always remap it and say, I'll make the name something logical. But most of the time, it's going to be a name defined by the manufacturer. So, like, NewTek has Mix 1 to, Mix 4 or Mix 8 on their TriCasters, and we have LTA 1 to 12. So it's just a fixed name on that side.
Now, is that something, for instance, like a MIDI playback? It just outputs NDI1, NDI2, whatever, how many sources you set up. Is that something in the future a manufacturer might be able to say, I could change the name within the app before it even gets to the network?
Uh, I, from a technical side, yes, but that wouldn't be something dynamic. I mean, if you kind of look over here, I'm just trying to think of when I add a source. Yeah, so if I added a source as an external source, I could go in and turn around and sort of change the name and the sort of the service name. So you can do it externally if you wanted to, but this would be something where, from a manufacturer, if they did it, it would be something that you'd have to restart the system, because that gets sort of published out. And, it is possible, in theory, you could have, if somebody changes the name, they could say this name is no longer available. I mean, all these things are in the protocol, but it would probably be something that most manufacturers wouldn't do, with the primary reason being, speaking as a software developer, tracking issues where somebody's coming back and I'm looking at this and they've changed the name, and well, I have no idea what you're doing. So from a support point of view, that could be tricky. Uh,
All right.
but I mean, the other thing you also get is memos in this. When you set up
Right.
device, you can put a little memo next to it. in Access Manager. So if you're setting this up, you have that ability too, where you could put notes. I don't know if that is available in the API, but that could be something more in line with what you're asking for. If manufacturers
Right.
would let you add memos to the sources, and then those memos would become visible downstream. That may be
Right.
something. I don't have a firm answer for that though.
Right. No, no, no. That's fine. I mean, obviously, for us pros, you think about along the lines as if you come and set up the show, if something was to happen to you, you want to make sure that someone else knows what exactly you're doing. I think I know you're not covering this today, but I think the new router adds a lot of those abilities for you to name things as they go out, and it
Yeah.
just shows up in the network as you want it. If you decide that's the router to become part of your workflow, so that's a good something that was added in with the router that you could change things around sources, so you could actually give it a name at that level.
Yes. So uh, NDI router is a lot more complex than most people think. They think of it sort of as a simple tool, but
Mhm.
as we were talking about, it does have a lot more depth to it. And I do think that's something that could certainly help with that sort of setup, where you want to sort of control all the names going in on your own. And y- because for people that are watching that don't know George actually does a lot of work in the cloud as well as things sort of on premise. So he's dealing with sort of both sides to this, where you're crewing things and you need to make sure everybody on your crew understands what's going on and can navigate the environment. And also when you're dealing with cloud-based things where you could have people in different locations that are actually part of a single production, and they all need to have a common language to communicate. So when you're talking about things, you're using fixed names for fixed systems with fixed roles, and that sort of thing makes it easy. So a lot of what George is really coming from on this is around this control framework. How do you build a workflow that can operate cleanly with the complexity of basically a open-ended NDI network? So, I mean, hopefully I don't mean to speak for you, but I just want to give
No,
people
no,
a
no,
little
no.
background.
That's fine. I mean, it's just adding to what we talked about earlier in the week. So, the one last I know we didn't talk about this a lot, is just being able to see what your network is doing. And that's more of an IT level, but I found that using something like Little Snitch, or even like we talked about, if you are using something like Ubiquity
Yep.
Dream router, is just to be able to narrow down that the VLAN or whatever the case may be. Little Snitch also gives you a good idea of what NDI is doing and how much resources you're being used in that network. Because for a lot of us that are not a larger company or just doing this maybe on show site, a lot of times we overlook, being able to track,
Yes.
how much overhead we have on that network. So I guess those are things down the road that needs to be addressed. It's addressed at the user level, but overall, I think it'll be a good idea for us to address how we just keep track of what the network is doing and how much resources are being used up.
Yeah, because I didn't really touch on it during the show, but there is a lot of traffic with NDI with just like mDNS. Like every time
Mhm.
something comes on or off, there's all these broadcasts happening. And you can find that things just get overloaded, things get backed up. And that can impact a lot of different things. It can, you lost packets, you can have things that just, take a while to show up. So all of these things are all related to network. And, it these types of tools are critical because let's face it, we're not going to go on and become full-fledged network engineers. You sort of you learn it through the old-fashioned way, pain. You sit there and go, yes, I've been bitten by this, and I got in and figured out how to track it. But these tools make a huge difference for that. So definitely agree. Getting that sort of view to your network is an important part of any production workflow, because no matter what, there's going to be networking issues creeping up at some point in what you're doing,
Right.
and having some plan for dealing with that, is critical.
All right, John. Thanks for expanding on that and
Oh,
covering it today. All right.
George, thank you for joining us here. It's always good
No
to see you.
worries. Take care. All
Take
righty.
care. Bye.
Bye.
Okay, so that George is a great guy, and I've gotten to know him over the last few years, and he's got a lot of knowledge to share. He's been doing this both cloud based and on-premises production work. So he sort of has seen all sides of this. So that was good to have him join us here. So I know there's a few more comments that have come in. So let's actually we'll jump to the post show and take in a more relaxed view and just go back and forth and cover any questions that we still have outstanding. So if you can't join us for the post show, thank you for joining us for our 100th show. We're really excited for what we're going to be doing moving forward. But this is sort of a milestone that we're proud of internally, because it's producing a weekly show can have its own challenges. So we're glad we got here, and thank you all for making that possible. If you can hang around, we'll see you in a few. Thanks so much. All right, welcome back everybody to our post-show hangout here. So, Battle is saying that his broadcast has matured because of these shows. But I think, and I'm speaking in all honesty, I think when we have a message to share, we continually are looking for better ways to do that. And that's, I think, Battle for Freedom. I mean, if you've tuned into his YouTube channel, there's a lot of content there, a lot of things that get shared that can get enhanced by different types of production techniques, expanded, camera positioning, different types of media. And, Battle's been doing that. The show has really matured. So this is something, we're grateful if we can help with that, but ultimately it comes down to having the content that needs additional production behind it. And that's something that you definitely should pat yourself on the back for, because there's a lot that goes into that. So let's see, we also have David Hurley. Hopefully I've said your last name correct, David Hurley. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us here. I think you guys you also asked about the bridge. So in the NDI frame. So have we used bridge when after 5.5? Yeah, I mean we have, and I think it seems to have worked reliably for us. But I do want to footnote all the stuff that even though we do a weekly show, we are not a production company. So we are not necessarily putting all these tools into the most challenging environments. Like going into hotels and connecting to remote resources and things like that. So definitely, we've seen 5.5 being really stable with bridge, but I would definitely ask you to if somebody else has different experience, please put that in there, because we have a limited framework to sort of discuss reliability about with some of these things. It's really more workbench experience rather than field experience. So let me see. So American Newscape. So yeah, thank you. This was a fun show to do, and given that we do so much with NDI, we figured this was a topic that was worth covering. So we also have Aziz. So Aziz came on, and how he's asking how long we've been in this business, and tell us a bit more about your work history. Okay, so this is that's an interesting path to sort of go through. I didn't start out in the production space. I actually started out developing systems for financial professionals, and a lot of these systems dealt with information and basically organizing information, and then later on we used a lot more AI style tools where we're going in and analyzing information and categorizing it dynamically. But at the end of the day, even though I got to work with some great people and do incredibly fun things on a technical level, I wasn't just drawn to sort of the financial industry as a whole. It wasn't something that resonated with me, but video production was something I really loved. And so after, it started about 10 years ago, I sort of left that space and said, I want to, start up another company that is focused here in the production space. And we started Neural Net. And from there, we've developed live to air and sort of all the remote stuff. And that came out of, I wanted to find a way to figure out what I was going to do next. And I was going to do that by a live show where I was interviewing people in the startup space to see what they were doing and the challenges and the different sorts of ideas they were toying with. And in doing that, I found there wasn't really a great tool to do these remote interviews over the internet. So I said, I guess that's the space I'm going to go into, and that's why we started Neural Net and sort of did live to air. And as we were doing this and we became more visible in the industry, I decided that I really wanted to get back to that original thought of doing a show and engaging with people. And as opposed to trying to find out what I wanted to do next, it became much more, about sharing what I knew and hopefully getting feedback about what everybody else was trying to do, and use that as a way to sort of understand the market, understand the people that could be using our product, and that those that are using our product, and see the types of things they're trying to do, because it's that sort of connection with a group that really becomes critical for a business. So that's sort of the big arc around the work history here. But I have to say, Streaming Alchemy has turned into more than just a sort of a business marketing thing. I love this community here. I love that I get to see and talk with the same people week after week, and that we have new people coming in with new ideas, new questions. So this has been personally incredibly fulfilling for me, outside of any potential business use cases around it. And I am thrilled that we have what we have here as a community. So thank all of you for that, and I am so grateful every week that I get to do this with you. So Aziz is asking, about more details about the company. So I mean, we are a small company, so we have won't talk necessarily specifics, but we have different people in different areas, and each one is sort of deeply involved. So we don't have a lot of abstract layers in our company. And so some of the people that we have here, Joe and Matt are part of the company, and we have other developers and other people that sort of run things in the business and do support. But so it is a small group, but everybody's really good at what they do and very focused on their different areas of responsibility. As a company, we sell a product called Live to Air, which lets you bring in remote guests. We have a 6-channel and a 12-channel, so you can do sort of really big events. You can chain these together, and you could have like 24-channel events with a little external configuration to make those types of things happen. So we're really focused on that space. We do also, have, sort of higher end scale products and custom products that we've done for clients that are all based on the same core model of bringing in remote guests into larger event spaces. And everything we've done around this is not just the technology. It's really something we come back to all the time. It's all around workflow. So how do you onboard guests? How do you work with guests when they are on air and when they're not on air, sort of in that off air mode? Do you have the facilities to build green rooms? Do you have the facility to bring in remote crew and work with remote crew, as well as having guests on air? So lots of different things. So when we looked at our products, that was really core to the approach we took. The technology was critical. Getting technology right is sort of what we call the jacks are better. To be in the game, you have to do technology well. But to become important to people, you really have to do workflow well. And that's one of the things that we've really been focused on. So hopefully we're hitting the mark, but we always want feedback from people to tell us how we can improve, because we have a lot of things planned and a lot of runway in front of us for product we want to release and capabilities we want to release. So feedback is critical to getting that right. So let's see. So, Aziz, thank you. As always, I appreciate you being a part of this community, and that's something I sincerely mean for everybody that's participating here and that's watching or watching the replay. I all feel very grateful to everyone being a part of this. So we have John Lind. John, thank you for joining us. No, the show hasn't ended yet. We're just sort of in the hangout, but this was, as I was saying, this is our 100th show. So sort of coming full circle to everything we talked about. That's really built around the community and everybody that supported the show. So this is definitely fun, and hopefully we have a lot more to do going forward with all this. But John, thank you for popping in and saying hi. We have Elvis Presley. Elvis, thank you. I appreciate you joining us here. So I think I've probably covered everything that I wanted to. So if there are any other questions, let's get them out, because there's some lag between when I see the questions and you ask them. So I want to make sure we hang around long enough for that. But I think for everybody that's used NDI, that it's if you've gone from sort of the long haul, you were the early pioneers, and you dealt with a lot of the hardships and struggles with the protocol early on. But I think now it really has matured to the point where it has very strong professional use cases that people should be exploring. So people that have been hesitant, that definitely is something that I think it's time to look more closely. The flexibility you get from NDI is really, really incredible. And again, I keep mentioning workflow. The types of workflows NDI enables are really unique and can make the entire production process much easier. Not only that, it's probably the single way available to move video reliably around inside the cloud, with very low latency and all the tools to manage it around that. So lots of reasons to look at NDI, but having been sort of there at the beginning, I think definitely this is something. So Aziz was just asking, do I think NDI is the future? I think that IP video and IP audio, sort of just media streams, are definitely the future. I think NDI sort of owns the biggest mind share right now. But I think NDI will continue to evolve. Dante, is another protocol in the IP space around audio and video. They're more known for the audio side than the video side, but they have both. NDI is definitely sort of more known for the video space, but they also work in the audio space. So those two sort of complement each other. But there are higher end protocols, things that SMPTE has come out with. A lot of those, though, are really designed for very high end infrastructures. So is it possible that you're going to see things coming out from SMPTE that will also target more mainstream network infrastructure? Very, very possible. I think the future is really, really open. There are different ideas, sort of the Dante model, which Ordinate makes. The Dante model is really centralized control. They have a single Dante controller, which lets you map receivers to senders. And so you just sort of say, I want to have this receiver go to these senders. These senders go to, this sender go to these receivers, and it just happens from a central location. NDI is more edge-based, but I'll tell you, in looking at what you see with NDI router, if you've looked at that from the latest NDI 5.5 tools, I could see some centralized NDI control creeping in there. So that's, we can talk about that on another show, but NDI router basically is a way to put little proxies at the ends to say, I want to connect this source to that destination. And that's kind of the way NDI router works. So I wouldn't be surprised if in NDI 6, router moves from being sort of a general tool to becoming a core configuration component in NDI. So that's sort of my uh, prediction for the future with NDI. And I also think Bridge in NDI is going to start to become more integrated. I expect that future TriCasts will have Bridge baked into them. And so, oh, hi, we actually have George just dropped back on to talk with us again. So George, yep, just give us a second here. We'll get on with
Sure.
you. Hi there.
Hey there.
Yeah.
We get in the middle of the frame here. So bridge and from venue to, let's say, AWS. So I find that have you have any issues using a VPN to be able to use bridge from premise to AWS?
So we haven't. I mean, most of what we've done in AWS is for sort of the live to air product. So when we've done things, we tested different pieces of this, but we haven't done a lot with VPNs or other stuff up there.
Okay, because I find yesterday turning on a VPN, I tried using the VPN to actually access bridge to AWS, and it wouldn't allow it. So I had to use my local IP address, my public IP address versus. So I'm just curious if that's an issue with bridge, or that's something that NewTek is not allowing
Yeah,
it.
I don't know if it's going to be specifically something with Bridge. I think this would probably be more something with what was allowed within the VPN, because I'm sure that there are certain ports or certain protocols that may not be available through the VPN. I don't know though. That's a more complex network question, but
Right.
it is most likely the VPN which sort of encapsulates the entire conversation. That may
Right.
have limitations on what's allowed to move, and especially
Okay.
things like multicast, where there may be things
Mhm.
that are trying to get shared that it's not allowing. And if I
Because
had to make a guess, that's probably where the
okay.
issue's at.
Because we talked about the reason for using that VPN from my location here to AWS is to be able to make sure that Companion is able to communicate with vMix in the cloud. So it allows everything to pass to the VPC. So I'm just curious to know, because it should work, because you're going directly to the VPC, which really exposes the rest of the computers. So I'm just curious I'll have to look some more into that. I was just curious if you had a direct answer for that.
Yeah, unfortunately, I'm sorry, I don't. And each VPN is going to have different capabilities in it, so it's going to be one of those things where, it's probably specific to the VPN you're using, like the combination of what Bridge is
Mhm.
doing plus that. But this is anything like that is definitely going to be happening on the sort of the protocol level and what gets passed. And it's probably, if I had to make a guess, and this is purely a guess, something to do with multicast and how the
Gotcha.
two bridges talking to each other, maybe using
Mhm.
multicast to share stuff, and it's not allowing that.
So on the topic of a live to air, so what are your recommendations right now for cloud-based machines on AWS instances to make sure that you have your live to air running efficiently in the cloud?
So for live there in the cloud, we're recommending sort of the G8s. That would be sort of the higher end.
Mhm.
I think it's like the DN XL8s. I think is the so 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 I yeah the G4DN. I'm sorry, I'm just 8 extra XL. So that would let you have the full bandwidth. You can work with the fours as well, but it still
Mhm.
needs to have the NVIDIA, they have Teslas up there. But, and one of the things from a configuration point of view is we don't recommend using the Teslas to do the encoding and decoding, even though it sort of takes a little load off the CPU. There is some abstraction that's going on for how you access them, and we found that created additional latency, and you didn't get the best experience. It was much better for decoding and encoding when you were using the CPU on that. So, so
So I always have to ask you, what's your thoughts? Anything has changed the future of the cloud? I know we're kind of back in the on-site mode, but I know there's more listeners here today. It was a one-on-one conversation, but I always like to
yeah.
know how folks are really feeling about the cloud. I mean, I still love it and I'm still pursuing it, but what's your thoughts as a developer?
I think the cloud is going to become a core piece of it. I mean, if you think of a lot of what we're doing now, and this is it's sort of a live to air is really natively cloud based. I mean, we are talking over the internet. There are remote servers in the back that are sort of negotiating. And what you do sort of from that central cloud is you have edge devices that actually integrate into the physical infrastructure that you need, like cameras or displays or things like that. This is just really that next level. Now I'm hosting full systems there, doing things like switching, doing things like encoding to stream out, all of that. So this is something where if you are looking at the cloud, it's just an extension of that local footprint. And I think like you have hybrid events, you're going to have hybrid gear. You can turn around and say, I could actually do all my encoding in the cloud. So I'm going to set it up and do that because, I'll send out, an SRT stream up to the cloud with but I'll do encoding up there. I can do a different CG stuff where that's easy to put down and I can have somebody, a remote CG operator or a scoreboard operator and stuff. Yeah, we'll do all that stuff and do that in the cloud. And I may have 2 or 3 people at a local venue, but I may have 2 or 3 other people that are coming in through cloud-based services I'm just integrating. So I think the model may be shifting where it's all in the cloud or partly in the cloud or just a little bit in the cloud, but mostly local. That's not going away. We're going to be seeing each one of those models sort of mature and it's going to become seems like I said, I think that new tech will build bridge into the TriCasters. And so you're
Right.
going to be sort of sitting there going, now this stuff is just like if I'm running it locally, I have bridge and I can talk to remote cameras. If I'm running it in the cloud, with like the Viz RT, versions of TriCast, you can turn around, have my cameras all in physical locations, but everything I'm doing up in the cloud now is pulling in those cameras over bridge. So lots of different models, but I think that will become sort of integral to product where you sit there and go, they just work wherever you put them and they can be configured for all the different combinations of because crewing is a big deal. I mean, if you think about what's involved, if you have to get somebody to a venue, you have a much smaller pool of people to pick from than if you can turn around and say, I need you to get on AWS Friday night from you know 4 to 10 and we're going to do a show. It's like, yeah, I'm not doing 2 hours travel, I'm not doing gas, and I'm not, I don't, I think that's just going to open up more opportunity. And it doesn't have to be somebody local, which is the other thing. You could turn around and say, yeah,
Right.
I have people now that, you know, the whole globe where I have relationships and people I trust, I now have those people that I could have crew different things. And I think that's another piece. This relationship part is a big
Right.
piece of productions.
So you got me thinking after our conversation a few days ago about converters. So I'm because obviously all of us are not going to go out and buy PTZ cameras. So I started thinking, why not just start putting converters on every piece of device? For instance, like the 6K Pocket 6K that I'm on right now. I had to think about it. Do I really want to put a converter in it? Because once you put a converter on that's non-black magic, you kind of lose control of shading of the camera, even though I'm in my lab space.
Yeah.
So, you know, I think it's going to become a thing where, for instance, my small space, it's probably more convenient to just go ahead and put an NDI converter on each piece of device, or maybe on the back end. You don't necessarily have to put it into the main feed, but because a lot of us are still using hardware switches,
Yeah.
so why not just put a NDI converter on the front end of each of those devices and then do the pass through over into your hardware switcher, to make sure at least you
Yeah.
have that resource, an NDI source. So that really got me thinking about, if you're not going to go out and buy PTZ cameras or NDI specific devices or hardware, it's probably a good idea to just go ahead and put a converter, whether it's Bird Dog or
Yep.
Magwell. So that's I think IBC is gonna. I saw something came across Discord yesterday about some new devices from Magwell. So it's gonna be interesting to see what comes up in as next week rolls in, and what's announced. So you got me thinking about putting some converters on every piece of laptop or cameras that I have in this space.
Yeah. And, that's something that I definitely agree. But this is something that we don't talk about, but like bridge, if you think about it, If you put a capture card in, I believe Bridge can also take capture cards. I may be wrong, but if not, that would be something very interesting where you could turn around and say, I'm going to use capture cards as my converters and use Bridge as my local transcoder to send these out. I'd have to look. I've never really looked up setting up Bridge with converters. Now, I know you can do it sort of a one hop where there are tools out there, NewTek makes them for doing the, SDI or HDMI into to NDI, and then you use Bridge to transcode and do things. But there are different tools to do all this stuff that could be interesting ways to do this type of routing and transcoding.
Cool, John. I promise I'm not coming back on again. I'm just going to stay in the chat. But I just want to get those thoughts out there, while I have you.
Cool.
All right.
I always welcome the sharing. Thank you so much, George.
All right, man. Have a good weekend if I don't talk to you again.
Absolutely. You take care.
All right.
All right. So let me see. So Ario has left a message here. So let's see. I probably have jumped over a few, but let me just say, so greetings, Ario. Thank you for joining us here. I am really impressed, that you're spending your Friday night with us, and honored as well. So thank you very much. So let's see, we have a few more. So let's see. John is saying being able to communicate with video in a. So this is John Lind is saying being able to communicate with video in a meaningful and intimate way is important to make such large organizations move in the right direction. Yeah, I mean, that's the messaging that you can do, and the way you do a production, I think, is critical. If you simply take the tools we have and sort of redo sort of the Zoom model of just like a bunch of faces all next to each other, you are losing some of the opportunity you have here. And I think there are a lot of components, not just the video piece, but the interactivity, the ability to create that sort of engagement. I mean, what we have here, what makes it valuable is that we have a lot of different thoughts that are bouncing around, and it's a two-way conversation for a lot of this. So I think that's another piece, and finding a way to integrate that smoothly, but deeply. So it is integral to what you want to do. Will definitely create that sort of intimate connection with I don't want to call them viewers because they're not. With an audience, with participants in an event that you're putting on, and large organizations can, it can be very difficult to have something that can connect with the people inside organizations, both for policy reasons, compliance reasons, technical reasons. So finding a way to do that, I think, is really the art behind all of this. And technology and art, that's sort of the name of the show, came from that sense of alchemy is science and art mixed together. So that was kind of the motivational, the aspirational goal of the show, was to sort of find a way to combine those two. So thanks for sharing that. So let's see. So Aziz is saying, so are you saying I could also use NDI to do some remote work? Absolutely. NDI Bridge will let you connect to remote NDI devices. And NDI, when I talk about a connection, it's audio, it's video, it is control, so like PTZ control, any sort of camera control that's enabled, and tally, so things that tell you you're on air or off air. All of that information is passed through in Bridge. So this means that if you're running vMix in the cloud and you're doing NDI-based PTZ control, you can control cameras remotely at a venue. So all that stuff is possible. And this I think is one of the big things. It isn't just moving video around, it's moving workflow around. It's giving you that ability now to do things that normally would have required hands-on at a specific location, and to do that across a network, across the internet, across locations. So that's a big piece to this. But yes, you can run cross countries. Yeah, so you don't have any issues with that as long as the network connection is good. So so let's see. I want to make sure I'm catching everything here. So let's see. So John is saying yes, more productions will become more hybrid. Uh, so yeah, I absolutely. You are going to have people that will decide what sort of split works for them and where they want to station people. But we talk about hybrid mainly from the point of view of the participants, so the audience participants, the people we're interacting with. But from the crew point of view, I think it's also going to become a lot more hybrid, where we're going to sit there and go full on everybody in one location to more distributed crewing for different roles and functions. And you can think of different things where if you have enough quality coming back, you could have people that will do color matching, and sort of painting your cameras, even if the camera's out of a remote location, and they may come on and do their thing pre-show and get all that set up for you, but that can all be done remotely. But there are lots of different roles in a production framework that we can start to reimagine now that we have more distributed ways to work. So absolutely, very cool things for how you can crew things now and how you can operate them. So a lot of stress on the workflows. So let's see. Yeah, I mean, and John also made the point. He says that they're blessed with bandwidth. And that is something having the bandwidth that we need to do these things is really what's making it. To the bandwidth and latency. I mean, I was shocked. We've done tests with AWS where you're doing things that are 1 or 2 millisecond ping latency between a remote site. And yes, that stuff is just incredible. That gives you basically the experience of working locally. And so, yeah, so having the bandwidth to move the data and having the latency in the infrastructure to sort of make it real time is critical. And the third piece really is having the compute power to do the encodes and decodes in a way where you can preserve enough quality but get the bandwidth down to manageable levels. I mean, NDI pure and simple over a network, I mean, that's 150 megabits per second per 1080p 60 source. So if you're looking and saying I gotta move 4 or 5 cameras, now you're talking that's just gigabit right there. So having the ability to do compression with HX3 and that gives you a lot more options on the bandwidth side. But those three things together, I think, are what's opening up this whole new world for us. So yeah, and we have Costin made a comment. I know it was addressed to John, but yeah, I think the appropriate infrastructure is really what I was talking about with those three things. So this really is a good tie-in. We do need, if you want to create this sort of hybrid working environment for people, that's going to become really important. And I know it is, the global internet is not equal opportunity right now. There are lots of places that are poorly served, underserved, have limited options for their connectivity, and that is not unique to Germany. We have one high-speed internet provider where we are, and that's it. You use them or you don't. And so having that sort of open competition, I think, will create the type of infrastructure growth and maturity that all of us need in the production space. So thank you for sharing that. So John is also mentioning that they want to improve two-way communication. So yeah, I think everything with, I mean, NDI is incredible because it can work on more standardized infrastructures, even in environments where you might not have them. Like as John is pointing out here, this could be going from meeting rooms to main studio. We have a client that is actually doing a lot of that right now, where they're a corporate that has multiple meeting locations, and they're pulling in sources centrally to a single studio. So I think that's definitely going to be a place where NDI can really excel. And this is going to be things where Discovery Server can be really, really helpful. Where you sit there and go, I just have my entire organization sort of running against a single Discovery Server, and everybody is able to go and sort of find the routes they need to share the media devices and media sources. So it's going to be more than just the traditional video production space. Anything which involves audio and video interaction is a potential space where NDI can play a big role. So, okay, we have George. He says, if only we could get our ISPs to play nice. Yeah, I agree. I mean, George is saying that you get selling download speeds, but upload speeds are, we actually, I mean, this is a true story. George is talking about upload speeds not being advertised anymore. We actually have 2 internet connections from the same provider. One is sort of a standard home internet, and the other is a business internet. The business internet has, for us, 500 meg down, but only 50 up. The home used to have the same thing. We had that sort of as a second redundant connection. But now anybody in the home space only gets 35 up, and they just capped it. If I had ordered it, a year ago, I would have gotten the 50 up. But so first it's capped at 50, which is not great for a production, but still workable. But the fact that they're actually lowering it now, I think it's really telling. It's basically saying that these companies are infrastructure constrained and are looking for ways to sort of improve their uplink bandwidth, but they don't have any good answers. It really just requires build out. And I agree. These ISPs need to play nice. We need to find ways to share common infrastructure. I mean, if we have big fiber runs, there should be ways that we could share that between different ISPs, and basically we could pick ISPs based on what they would offer us, but the physical to the premise could be fairly consistent. So lots of things I could hope for, but unfortunately, right now we're dealing with sort of an infrastructure mess out there. So, George, thank you for calling that out. So John is saying that their headquarters infrastructure is way too enterprise to make it real time. Yes, and I'll be honest, security protocols, they kill everything. It's they're not designed for anything real time. They're not designed for low latency. I mean, deep packet inspection. The way that different service ports are blocked. It does make it very hard to sort of work as an open communications framework. But hopefully, as the corporate world starts to recognize video and audio as core business elements, things that are essential for the business overall, you could actually do parallel networks that maybe don't need to internally go out to the broad internet, but for talking to each other, those things could be less encumbered and more optimized for media streams. And so, hopefully that's something. But I think that what you'll see is that sort of bifurcation. There'll be media infrastructure and there'll be IT infrastructure, and they'd probably have to exist in parallel, because there's just no way you're going to get, the person running IT isn't going to get fired because you have a crappy video connection. They will get fired if a database inside the corporation gets hacked because somebody was able to get through a port or onto the network somehow. So their incentive structure is really around locking things down, constraining as much as possible outside of core, what's needed for core business requirements. So it really is going to take the appreciation of audio and video as another level of core business requirement to see this sort of change and to see that investment made. But security protocols are sort of the bane of anybody doing remote production right now. So, all right. So this was a great show, and I really appreciate all the feedback and things you shared about your own experience with sort of this broader environment with NDI. So, but I think it's probably good to wrap this up. We've been going an hour and a half, so this is a pretty long show. So thank you all for sticking with us and for really keeping the conversation going. So we will be back next week with another show. Until then, everybody be safe, be well, take care.